Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about the tricksters in the Supernatural universe. Yes, the trickster, but also some of the others who had some of those trickster characteristics. And before we start, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Dime.
Hi, I am Dimeliora. I have been writing in the Supernatural fan fiction space for what feels like most of my life now, and hopefully through most of the end of it.
All right, Wrenn.
Well, I'm a con runner of 30 some years. I am an editor. I do layout work for publications. I am not a writer. Among other people here are writers. I'm also opinionated, very opinionated, and that's what happens why I end up on these panels. So, next.
All right, Tawdra.
Hi, I'm Tawdra Kandle. I am a romance author of multiple titles, multiple genres, and I've been a Supernatural fan for a long time.
All right, Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and I've been a Supernatural fan since that very first episode aired.
All right, and I'm Gail C. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, but all my modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. Fell in love with the show halfway through season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months to get started for season 12. Haven't looked back since. So when we start talking about the trickster, let's start with the big guy, and that is Gabriel, aka Loki, aka, all of his many personas. It's hard to tell whether he's a good guy or a bad guy because he just keeps going back and forth across that line. What comes to mind right off the bat when we start talking about Gabriel? Dime?
One of the longest running arguments I've had with fellow fandom friends is about Gabriel, specifically because he's kind of polarizing for a lot of people, mostly for, Mystery Spot. In my opinion, and it is not a popular one, I think that Gabriel can't quite be judged that way. I don't think he's a good guy or a bad guy. I think he works within an ethical system we can't really understand. And with that in mind, I find him incredibly admirable just because he puts himself, whether or not he wanted to be there, he puts himself in danger there at the end to make sure that the brothers get out. And he does it because the apocalypse comes and everybody's going to end anyway. Just a heads up, I have not seen season 13, so I'm prepared for spoilers, but I can't talk about it, so I have nothing good to say there. But ultimately, I think that within the moral system that he set for himself regarding his family and not actively killing his brothers, I think that he is exceptional. I think he's an exceptional character. I think he's an exceptional angel. I think he's an exceptional trickster.
All right, Wrenn.
I, on the other hand, think you can understand him. I think he starts out now. They've a lot of written about that. A lot of things talked about it. That he wasn't really Gabriel the first time we meet him, but he definitely wasn't just a trickster, because he survives being staked. But when they brought him back, the whole, maybe retconned or not, but hey, when he came back with Mystery Spot, the first he was in, as he said, witness protection program. He went to ground, ran away from his family, went to ground, was living his bestest life, having fun, just being the frat boy that he was. When it comes to Mystery Spot, he went all in for the apocalypse. He's like, fuck it, it's gonna happen. I'm going to convince these two to do what they're supposed to do, because that's my position in this. That is for them, why he kept on shoving them into that, killing Dean, getting them to hit all out, even through to changing stations, to get them to do what they're supposed to fucking do. But he changes when they don't do it. He changes. he hides out again. Well, he goes and plays again, but he changes. By the time it gets to the later seasons, he throws all in with the boys. So he actually has a redemptive arc in many ways. But then again, he runs away again because he always runs away until he can't, because he gets captured. He is diminished. He's no longer as powerful as he was. I'm going to leave it to the next person now.
Okay, Tawdra.
I always think about Gabriel, Loki, Trickster in his role as a brother between Lucifer and Michael. I think he reminds me of the middle brother that Sam and Dean never really had to kind of, because Gabriel always felt pulled and in the middle of the two of them, and knew from the beginning that he kind of played that role, and that he didn't have a way to win, really. I loved, in retrospect, when I go back and see Mystery Spot now, I mean, it's just, to me, it's predicting what's going to happen again and again and again. And I think he tells them exactly what the problem is and how they can solve it, and they don't listen. And, that's his role. So I think it must be incredibly frustrating for him. As a character, I think he's amazing. I would love for there to be an entire series that was just like everything that happened to him from the time he left heaven all the way through, with, maybe some cameos with Sam and Dean. So, because I think actually Sam and Dean are a very small part of his overall life. So
that's part of his life as an X-rated porn star too. There's part of that in there. But...
Wow, I know when to join a panel.
Well, let's do Elektra, and then we'll come back to Carole. Elektra?
I think that part of it is he's very, very method. When he went into hiding, he knew the only way he was going to be able to stay in hiding is if he truly believed in his heart of hearts that he was a trickster, and that he was no longer an angel. He was going to, I'm a trickster now. And he bought into it. And that was what he was doing. But somewhere in there, it weaseled in there that there were lessons he could teach, even as he was playing this role. And even as he moved through, and they realized he wasn't really a trickster and there was something else, he kept trying to feed them as much information as he could without, endangering himself, because if it wasn't his family he was running away from, it was Norse gods. There was always someone. And it was interesting to watch him try and entangle himself away from his family and be helpful to the boys, while still keeping himself in hiding as much as possible.
Okay. And Carole, give us a quick introduction and your thoughts on whether the trickster is good or bad.
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I've been a fan since season 3, started writing fanfic in 2012, and I love coming on continual panels, and there's always something new to talk about with Supernatural. Now, whether he's a good or bad, well, really, he really treads that line. He's firmly in that gray area, I think. There are times he does, quote unquote, the right thing because it serves his interests best. There's times where he just doesn't care if it's the right thing or not. He does whatever is his interests best. But you do see moments where he seems to acknowledge that there is a greater good at work, or needs to be at work, and he will come down on the side of that. And it's nice to see him kind of transcend his own self-absorption. I think one of you was just saying about how he really sunk himself into the role of the trickster and teaching lessons and things. And I'm sure even as Gabriel, he must have had some kind of really wicked sense of humor. The angels probably were always getting pissed at him. So I think he does become fond of Sam and Dean, and if only for that reason will actually help them. But I think being fond of them led him back to there's more at stake sometimes than just my pleasure or my amusement or getting out with my skin intact. And that's the stuff that then veers him back more to the good side.
I guess I come at it from two different directions. One is there are a lot of tricksters in literature, and they are usually kind of a chaotic neutral sort of character, to borrow from D&D. They aren't good, they aren't bad, they are almost a force of nature, and they usually do exist to teach people lessons or to make people think or to kind of balance the scales a little bit. They meddle, but it's usually for a purpose. And so I think a lot of the times we see Gabriel doing what he does, he is very much playing that traditional trickster, chaotic, neutral role of the experiential teacher. I could tell you this, or I could make you live it, and I can have you find it out for yourself. And that's very Gabriel. The other side of it is Gabriel, the archangel, was the messenger of heaven in scripture. So, and I know that's a lot to square with Richard Spade playing the character, but as a messenger, then he's bringing these sometimes coded messages. He's trying to get a message across in most of his interactions with the boys. And I think that's kind of an interesting insight as well. I did see a translation that said that, the classic Christmas nativity message of the angel, fear not, actually translates as stop screaming, it'll be okay. And I can just really imagine our Gabriel saying, stop screaming, it'll be okay. So what's your favorite Gabriel episode? Done?
Mystery Spot.
Okay, I should say besides Mystery Spot, because we'll just put it out there that probably we all love that one best. Got to think a little harder.
Boo. Changing Channels would probably be the next one. I think I'm looking at it from a different angle. I don't see Gabriel's actions as being like you have to accept what's coming. I think that a lot of what he does when read in the context of both the mythology that it's taken out of and then the world that he sort of lives in, he shows a lot of underhanded help. It's not necessarily the help you want, but it certainly is the help you need. So, whether we wanted it, we needed Dean to sit in Sam. I'm sorry, that was supposed to be a joke, but it did not land. Thank you. Just the one. But I think with Changing Channels, like we see this wide variety of his particular view on humanity. This is all of humanity boiled down into a stupid game show, a dramatic Grey's Anatomy knockoff. Like all of these things are what he sees humans as. None of them are insulting. None of them are mean. He seems to enjoy every single last one of them. And that's what I really like about him, I think, is that he just he's alive. He wants to be a part of humanity. He wants to enjoy the things around him. He wants to be, and he wants the world to continue being around him. And I think Changing Channels really shows that playfulness in him.
Okay, Wrenn. You're muted. You're muted.
Bring him back alive, because that's when he destroys Asmodeus. When he destroys Asmodeus, that's why I like that one. Yes, he's broken, he's damaged, but he pulls his ass together. That's why that one is better. The other one, I'm trying to pull up the name of it. Of course, the scene. My favorite double scene is when he and Rowena get together, but that's besides the point. My favorite, that's episode 21 of season 13. But I forget the name of it right now. I have to look it up. But my favorite is Bring Him Back Alive, aside from Changing Channels, where you get his backstory and his motivations. his current motivations, is when a broken, damaged Gabriel gets his shit together and takes out his Stormater.
Carole?
I'm going to go with the first episode we see him in. You know, we come in blind. We have absolutely no idea what the heck is going on. There's some kooky stuff happening. We get to see Sam and Dean interacting in hilarious ways, especially when they're both telling the bar story in completely different ways. And we don't know why this is happening. And it turns out, of course, it's because of him, but we get to see the results of his trickstering before we quite know who's pulling these strings. And then when we do, he's so straightforward about it. He's so like, you know, yeah, this is me. And, you know, I want to have hot girls feeding me whipped cream. And, you know, he's just very straightforward. Here's what he wants. Here's what he thinks. Here's what his job is. And it's just really fun. It's fun to see him reacting with everybody. And even at the very, very end, and we're like, okay, they got him. And of course they didn't. And we just know that, wow, he's a really wily character. We don't know at that point that we are going to see him again, but what a great introduction to him. And so that when we did see him again, we were really excited because we knew some really fun stuff was going to happen. And yeah, let me just jump on the changing channels train, because that is just, that whole episode is a gift. It's a gift. And yeah, I thoroughly, of course, enjoyed every moment of that. But yeah, the first one, here he is, and he makes an impact.
Okay. Tawdra?
Where'd you get the oil?
Yeah, definitely Tall Tales is great, because you just don't know. Like you said, you're coming in cold. You don't know who you're really dealing with. And changing channels, my favorite part of it is the Knight Rider part, because I think that's so funny that, you know, with the Dean's feeling about baby and everything that Sam is, that absolutely I thought was hysterical. But Hammer of the Gods too, his role there, you know, I think that's where you realize that he has a you know, a position with the other gods and the demigods and everybody who's meeting there at the Elysian Fields. And, you know, one of my favorite lines in that is when he says to Sam and Dean, it's time to let the adults talk, or, you know, go back to your room, and because the adults need to talk. And you realize just how powerful he is. But yeah, I would say those are the later ones I enjoyed too, but those to me are just classic Trickster.
Okay. Elektra?
Well, I really enjoy all the really, really funny ones. And those are really good for releasing the tension that can really build up in Supernatural. I super enjoy Unfinished Business, where we start to get an idea of he's a trickster at heart, but when all the tricks are played out, there's a guy there who isn't going to let anything slip by. And that's the one where he shows up with wooden swords and takes care of business.
Okay.
And I really like that we get to see that side of him too.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to agree with Tawdra on Hammer of the Gods. And I think part of that was we're starting to see some real evolution in Gabriel's character, where he realizes that neutrality is not going to be an option, or that neutrality is really picking a side. Because if you don't help the other side, you're on the side you don't like. And I thought that the whole interchange between him and Lucifer was very, very heartfelt. You know, you really felt the brotherhood there. And of course, all those many mirrors with Sam and Dean and all the other brothers we see in the show. But we saw two estranged brothers who just couldn't find a meeting point, just couldn't accommodate each other. And that was really heartbreaking, I think. And he stood his ground. And then, of course, we get the Casa Erotica video. This is me standing up and this is me lying down. And that's just so Gabriel, but, saving the world with a porn video. But I thought that episode was interesting on so many levels, but his role in it particularly struck me. So we see trickster type characters over and over again. At first, we think Gabriel is Loki for a while there, or we think that Loki, we aren't sure they're the same person, although they do look a lot alike. And we get the whole gods, Norse gods interplay, and the Norse gods show up a number of times in the show. Let's talk a little bit about Loki before we go on to some of the other types of tricksters. Anything that we haven't said that you want to add about Gabriel as Loki, Dime?
I would be fascinated to learn more about his relationship with Kali. Just the concept of a god, if that's the skin he's wearing at that point, the concept of a god that's supposed to have such a heavy hand in his own apocalypse, having relations with a goddess who is there specifically to remember souls and keep them around for eternity. So to stop that very kind of thing. And then the other side of them, Loki is a trickster, but he was never really a warrior, whereas Kali is very much in one aspect a warrior. I would love to know like how that happened, and also whether or not he was the little spoon, which I am certain he was, but I just really like it like confirmed by somebody in charge.
Well, Kali is both creation and destruction. So, she's playing both sides of the street there, which I think makes it especially interesting. Wrenn? You're muted. You're muted.
I mute myself so that anything might happen with the cats. You wouldn't hear it all because
I know.
they're chasing each other occasionally. Basically, I'm interested in how he brokered that deal. I mean, how do you broker? I mean, Loki is not one to usually sit back and not play tricks. So is he just franchising out to Gabriel, or is he just, because he's not taking over? Which makes the god, the hammer of the god situation. Why did Gabriel show up and not Loki? So maybe Loki knew something was going to go down and stayed out of it. But I don't know, because that it's trying to read too much into it. What the writers' rooms do what the writers' room do. So if we try to like pick it apart too much, we're heading down to plot holes that happens. So I'd like to know how he brokered that deal to be a Loki, probably not the Loki, but a Loki.
Yeah.
You mean besides badly?
But honestly, the way they're talking about it, you realize everything that angels do fits into what a trickster would do, being able to warp reality. We saw a number of the other angels do that. Make you see what is not there. Make what's around you look differently, which is what Loki did with making a seat in a motel room look like a 5-star resort. All these things angels can do. All we've seen other angels do. So for an angel to subsume into a trickster is not that much of a change in your skill set. So
yeah, good point. Carole?
I would have liked to see what would have happened if he and Rowena had had a chance to continue their fraternization. They had their moment of passion there behind the stacks, but it would have been interesting to kind of see them, maybe not quite head off into the sunset, but how, go from one of those impetuous moments to finding out that maybe they really had a bond and they really had, respect and affection for each other, and what could have happened with that. I would have enjoyed that.
Okay. Tawdra?
Well, first of all, I want to say that in my imagined Gabriel show, how he and Loki made friends and whatever would be the whole first season. Just putting that out there. I think what I like best with the Loki Gabriel kind of comparison is that, again, you're talking about brothers, you're talking about a father. It's so, you know, when Loki says, well, you know, I didn't, later on he says to Dean, I think, you know, I didn't love Odin, but didn't want Gabriel to kill him, and blames Gabriel for Odin, you know, Odin dying. So I kind of would love to have seen a little bit more into the Gabriel Loki. I agree how that happened, how it began, and then what was going on between them all those years.
Okay. Elektra.
I'm thinking about what Wrenn said about how angels could subsume themselves as tricksters, and then trying to imagine something like Michael doing that with his arrogant self. And it just doesn't work. You have to have an angel who's willing to subsume themselves into another role, and then not stand up there and say, look, it's me, you know, Michael, or I'm here, I'm Balthazar. I mean, they're all so tied up in who they are. I don't know of any of other angel that we've seen that's willing to give it up.
And personality wise, as opposed to skill set. I mean,
they've all got the skill set.
The skill set.
But personality wise, they're also tied up in their ego. That it seems like he was the only one who was willing to give up that ego for maybe the greater good. And we're back on that theme of the guy that should be in charge is the one that doesn't want to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that also strikes me over and over again with Gabriel's character, and particularly in opposition to Lucifer, is Lucifer resented the fact that Chuck made these humans and then loved them. Now, how much Chuck actually loved the humans does come into real question by the end of the show. But he was passingly fond of us, at least for a while, till he got bored and we didn't behave. And Lucifer was jealous of the attention going to the new baby, such as it was. And Gabriel comes down and likes humans, likes being among us, likes us despite the fact that humanity often isn't likable, and sees the best and sees something worth fighting for. And I think that's a very interesting shade on him, because Chuck likes us for entertainment. Michael thinks that we're scum. Raphael and Uriel really didn't have any use for us unless it was following Daddy's orders. Lucifer was downright jealous, but Gabriel looked and said, you know, I think there's something here that's worth keeping. This is kind of fascinating. I like these guys. And that is a really interesting shade on him, unlike almost any of the other characters. Even Cass at the beginning is just an angel doing his job. Balthazar's just trying not to get killed. Gabriel genuinely likes humanity, even when, you know, we're not at our best. So I think that's a really fascinating character insight. But now we do. Oh, go ahead.
But is that before he hung out with us for a bunch of years, decades, centuries, or after? Because he went into witness protection because he was sick to death of his family. So did he learn to like humanity?
I don't know. You know, he could have been a little predisposed to us to start with. We don't know. I just think it's fascinating that of all the angels who have observed humanity, certainly for millennia, he's the only one who seemed to actually get us, even more so than Chuck. Pardon me. So we have other tricky characters that we run into over the course of the show who may not be the trickster with a capital T, or truly Loki, but who do their share of misdirection and misidentification and turning people around. And so we see that trickster element in some of the others who aren't really who we think they are up front. Who are some of those other characters, and who are your favorites? Time?
I'm looking up the name of the episode because I'm always very bad at that.
Me
But
too.
I would I would like to start with the fairies. That entire clap your hands if you believe. Nope, that's just the leprechaun one. Anyway,
Oh, no, that is the
uh,
favorite.
that is the fairy. Oh, good. Okay. The entire fairy episode, just the way that they sort of like dick around with the Winchesters, they make it so that it's a different number of potential like outcomes. And then Sam and Dean have to deal with these tiny naked people beating them up and tricking them into different things. I think that whole episode was really like a humbling, a good old taste of humble pie for the boys, because they went from these very badass interactions, these very adventurous things, to having to deal with the fact that sometimes the supernatural threat is just like a goofy little creature that wants a bowl of cream and to beat you up just a tiny bit.
Okay. Wrenn?
I like Balthazar. Like Sebastian Roach is quite beautiful. I mean, I'm sorry, I think he's absolutely gorgeous, but that's just my take. Balthazar, I agree with him about the Titanic. You know, I agree with him, get rid of that movie. So when that episode happened, I was totally gone. That was it. Balthazar, I loved him when they killed him off. But yes, Balthazar and the unsinking of the Titanic won my heart. I love him dearly. And it was a fantastic episode in my opinion. Yes, it didn't have much to do with that. Yeah, I got to start fixing everything again. But that one, yes. Balthazar is one of my favorites. Also, to a certain extent, the Old Death. He was tricky. But I'm going to stick with Balthazar.
Okay. Carole?
I don't know if this entirely counts, because tricksters do tend to work in the external world, but in terms of changing a world within one's mind, I would say the djinn. I mean, we have that whole thing where while Dean is really hanging by his wrists up in a old empty warehouse getting all the juice sucked out of him, but in his head he's living an entire life different from the way his real life is, and it's so real that he has no reason to think it's not real. Even as he's wondering, how can this be happening, he's still content to go with it. He still just kind of runs with it for a while until the cost of it becomes known to him. So he's willing to go with, hey, mom's alive. And yeah, I don't get along with my brother, but there's a lot of other good stuff happening. And he buys into this whole world until he finds out, yes, that flight that they saved was not saved and everybody died in the crash. So the djinn was doing it, of course, for his own purposes, for his own feeding. But I thought that was, that's pretty tricky. Let's just put you in this alternate reality in your head that's so cell deep, believable that you just go with it until you die.
Mm-hmm. Tawdra?
Well, I was thinking of the djinn too, and definitely Balthazar. The episode, what was it, the French Mistake, where he throws them into the supernatural world, that I thought was just amazing. I mean, the first thought is, oh, this just reeks of Gabriel. This whole idea just reeks of Gabriel. But if I'm looking at other characters, I would almost have to say Rowena. She is very tricky. She kind of, she is out for her own self for the most part. And you never know whether she is on your side or whether she's not. I mean, trusting Rowena, it's not a real good proposition. You don't know. Every time you're kind of tempted to think, oh, she really is a good mother and she does love Carole, whatever she does something that you go, no. And, even when the boys were trusting her, I tended to to wonder what she was really up to. So she was definitely, you know, had some trickster-like qualities.
Okay. Elektra.
Well, in The Gamblers, the goddess Fortuna pretended to just be another one of those people in the bar playing pool, looking for luck, when she was actually running the whole show. But we have to give at least a nod to the biggest trickster of them all, which would be Chuck, who pretended for how long to just be, oh, that writer in the corner, and he was just a prophet. And never said anything other than that for the longest time.
Okay.
Until we found out otherwise.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little darker turn with it, because tricksters in many legends also have a dark side, and say Crowley and Ruby, because neither of them were usually what we thought they were. Like Rowena, you never knew what you were going to get with Crowley. Was he, talk about a frenemy? I mean, you know, sometimes he was on your side if it suited him, sometimes he was not. Most of the time he was in it completely for himself, except maybe you could argue when he sacrificed himself in the AU world. There was always something in it for him, but he played the boys beautifully many a time when they thought they had him figured out, and they didn't, and he got one over on them. And then I think Ruby was probably one of the trickiest of all, because she got to Sam when he was vulnerable and worked that vulnerability to worm her way in, and had him fooled all the way up to, you know, killing Lilith and breaking the final seal. And she celebrates that she had fooled everyone. And wasn't she just fantastic? And then she gets stabbed. But, you know, she certainly did fool Sam, or at least he let himself be fooled, even when many people around them never did, you know, trust her. She managed to get him good. So I think that to me is one of the trickiest of them all.
Well, that's one of the bumper stickers that came out of the series. You know, killing Lilith seemed like a good idea at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that was such a mind flip with the show, because why wouldn't killing Lilith be a good idea, unless she happens to be the final seal? And so the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that's certainly true more than one time in the show, is road to perdition.
And repeatedly, they always were killing the bad guy. That was the meme of the show, was they killed the bad guy. They killed the bad guy. They always kill the big bad. That's the dream of every single video game.
Except, oops, maybe we shouldn't have this time. Yeah.
Well, and you could argue convincingly that Sister Joe was something of a trickster. I mean, she was a label whore, but, you know, that wasn't what her real identity was. She was just pretending to be a label whore.
Right.
And I think she really was a label whore. She just,
yeah, well, but I mean,
that was the
really,
side benefit.
An angel.
That was the perk.
But she was also pretending to be, you know, almost like Roy in Faith. She was pretending to be a faith healer when that was not actually what she was. Their faith in it had nothing to do with it. She could have healed them whether they believed in her or not. And so she was very much a con man.
She was sort of pretending to be a con man healer while not being one. It was a really weird double con she had going on. Mm-hmm. It was very much a pay me and I'll heal you, but I'm going to pretend that I can't do it, because otherwise I'll never be able to go out and spend the money.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be no time.
Yeah.
Line out the door, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know, on a lesser level, Mrs. Butters was something of a trickster, in that she was not who she seemed to be until we got further into the episode and found out she was far more powerful and had a far darker background than she let on at first, you know, other than just baking birthday cakes and having holiday celebrations. So
Your 50s mom is not your 50s mom.
yeah, there were a lot of characters in Supernatural who weren't what they appeared to be for a long time. And you know, I guess to an extent you could also say that when Zachariah sent Sam and Dean, well, when he sent Dean into the Endverse universe, and when he sent them into the Smith and Wesson universe, there's an element of Trickster there as well, because he's altering reality and he's putting them into a game that only he knows the rules of.
And Charlie was not entirely what she seemed. She had a kind of murky, dark past. She wasn't just, you know, the happy-go-lucky hacker.
No. And she was very good at coming up with false identities. So she could be whatever she needed to be in the moment, which is something of a trickster. Well, folks, believe it or not, we've blown through our time,
Wow.
as we always do on these. But thank you so much for being here. And before we wrap up, please let everybody know where we can find you online. Don?
I am on Archive of Our Own and Live Journal as Dimeliora.
Wrenn?
You can't find me. No, I'm sorry.
You're right there.
I'm like the editors here, like the writers here. I'm just an editor and a con runner and the wife of a science fiction author. Find me through my husband. My husband is Keith R. DeCandido, who wrote the first, the third, and the fourth Supernatural tie-in novels. He's easy to find. He likes to be found. I can be found through him.
Okay. Carole?
I'm Carole M. Stokes here on Facebook. I'm often in Continual and on the TFWNC Supernatural group. I'm on Twitter as true_firesign10. I'm on AO3 and Instagram as firesign10. And I'm one of the 3 co-hosts of So Get This, the Lore of Supernatural fan fiction podcast, which is on Spotify. And we also have sites on Facebook and Instagram under So Get This.
Very nice. Tawdra?
I'm on Facebook as Tawdra, Instagram as Tawdra, and at tawdrakandle.com, and that's Tawdra with a T and Kandle with a K.
Very good. Elektra?
You can find me at untilmidnight.com, and I am at Elektra at Wandering Shop on Mastodon. Come find me there.
I'm pretty easy to find everywhere at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. Spell them right. You'll find me on all the social media sites. I do run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook. I'm a columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog, but most of the time I'm here on Continual. So thank you all so much for spending the evening with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more Supernatural coming up soon. So we'll see you online.